Good evening. I'm very happy to be with you this evening. I feel like it's been a long time since I had the opportunity to speak with you. Right now we are at the very beginning of Holy Week, preparing for the days ahead, and that is what I'd like to address this evening. I'd like to begin by reading the first Gospel from Palm Sunday. It is from the Gospel of Luke, in chapter 19. When Jesus approached Bethany, near the mount that is called Olivet, he sent two of his disciples, saying, "Go into the village ahead of you. There you will enter, and you will find a colt tied on which no one has yet sat on. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, 'Why are you untying it?' just simply say, 'The Lord has need of it.'" So those who were sent went away and found it, just as he had told them. As they were untying the colt, the owner said to them, "Why are you untying the colt?" And they said, "The Lord has need of it." They brought it to Jesus, and they threw their coats on the colt and put Jesus on it. As he was going, people were spreading their coats on the road. As soon as he was approaching near the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples pulled off their cloaks and threw them on the ground in front of him and praised God. They praised God with a joyful, loud voice for all that they had seen, shouting, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." Excuse me. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." But Jesus answered, "I tell you this, if these become silent, the stones will cry out." And when he approached Jerusalem, Jesus saw the city and wept. And this is the gospel of the Lord. As I was preparing to speak with you this evening, I was reminded of something that happened to me many, many years ago. I think I was about 5 or 6 years old, and my family went to Rye Playland in Rye Beach. My father really didn't know what to do with kids to keep them entertained, so we saw every amusement park in the New York City area, but this one was one of our favorite. Now remember, I was 5 or 6, and there was a place there called the Fun House, the Magic Carpet. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember it. The Fun House Magic Carpet. It looked like a building out of Morocco. Don't worry, I didn't remember that. I looked it up on the computer and saw it. And my brother, who was 5 years older than I, he was going into the Fun House. And I wanted to go too. So my parents told him to take me and stay with me. Okay? Well, we got inside, and my brother took off and left me. And that began the saga of the little girl in great turmoil. It was dark inside, like black. Okay? And these things were coming out from the walls, and the floors were crooked, and there were doors that weren't doors, and oh, I was so upset. And I could see ahead of me. Every time I made a certain turn, I just could see a peak of light. And I thought, okay, just keep going to that. Now, I remember this, so you know how terrifying it was to me. Well, finally, I got out to this little balcony, and I put my hands on the railings, and I froze, and I started to cry. And one of the young men who was working the fun house said, "Keep going, keep going." I couldn't move. I just cried in terror. So they went to get a ladder. And the attendant climbed up the ladder, and I wouldn't let him touch me. I just held on to that railing, and I cried, "Daddy, Daddy." Well, along came Daddy. He climbed up. He took me in his arms, and he said, "I got you." We climbed down the ladder, and then my father said, "Let's do this together, okay?" And back into the fun house we went. But this time, even though I was really afraid, I was not alone. I was safe. I could hear, "I got you." Well, I remembered that story as I was thinking about giving this talk and all that's going on, and I just said, boy, for that little girl, there was a lot of turmoil. And isn't there a lot of turmoil today everywhere? Everywhere. And into this, we prepare for Easter. Well, the more I thought about it and prayed about it, it seemed right. And the readings from yesterday, from Palm Sunday, there's two sets of readings. One is the one I just read. The other one is the reading of the Passion and Death of Jesus. Now, a priest friend of mine said to me, they put them both there because most people don't come to Good Friday, so they get to hear it. I don't think that's true. Okay? I don't think it's true. I think that they belong together. Okay? Jesus' entry into Jerusalem and the Passion. Now, I don't want to disappoint anybody who really loves getting the palms. I just want to know what you do with them in 6 months. Okay? But maybe you have a special place you keep them, whatever. I want to tell you, Palm Sunday is not about the palms. It's not even about the procession. It never was. Okay? It's telling us something else. The whole city of Jerusalem was in turmoil. Now pay attention here. Jesus' procession came at that moment. He came into Jerusalem, and he was greeted as a king. And just as that was happening, about the same time, there was something else going on. As Jesus entered the city from the east, at the opposite end of the city, Pontius Pilate, the governor of Judea, was entering from the west. Now, it was standard practice that the governor would come for the high holy days, particularly Passover, in case there was any trouble. But just think about this contrast now. Jesus rode a donkey into Jerusalem. Pilate rode a war horse, leading a column of soldiers. Does it sound anyway familiar with what's going on today? Okay, one had cloaks and branches thrown down. The other carried weapons and armor. One was disarmed and nonviolent. The other came armed and ready for violence. One procession willed life. The other willed power. Which of those do we choose? Don't say your answer yet, because there's a course there. St. Luke, and that's the gospel we read from tonight, and the gospel they read yesterday, gives us a different view than the other gospels. Okay? The other evangelists, gospel writers, they gave us a different perspective about the beginning of Holy Week. In Luke, it's not palms and Hosanna. They're not there at all in that story I read you. It's cloaks and praises. That's what's part of the celebration. The people's cloaks, their protective outerwear, they took off and put down for Jesus to move over, leaving themselves exposed. And what does Jesus do? Well, right at the end, we are told when Jesus sees the city and all the cloakless people, nothing covering them, he weeps. And he says, if only this day you knew what makes for peace. If only this day. Now, I never realized this before, but it was only after a few weeks of reading the different Gospels on Holy Week and praying with them did I come to this, and how fitting it is this very year that the church has given us Luke's Gospel for Palm Sunday, the beginning of Holy Week. Look at our world. Are you not heartbroken? I am so heartbroken for the Ukrainian people and for all people who believe in freedom. Look at our country. Boy, I don't remember a time in my life where we were this polarized, even during the wild and crazy 60s. And let's look at ourselves. We have been going through almost 3 years now of a pandemic. And just when I thought, okay, I can take off the mask, maybe I'll do a gathering in person at Easter, we had a resurgence of the Omicron virus. What about our own lives? So many. This has been a time of sadness and isolation and, just loss. The friends I have lost during this time. Well, that sounds all rather down, doesn't it? But I think it describes what turmoil is. And the city of Jerusalem is in turmoil. This is a phrase often used in Scripture, at the appointed time. This certainly is the appointed time for this gospel from Luke, isn't it? To see it through his eyes, to know that we are asked to welcome Jesus by taking off our cloaks, whatever we cover ourselves with, right? And place it down to welcome Jesus, to see us as we truly are, our world, our country, our souls. And he looks at it and he weeps because he sees the pain, the cruelty, the loss, the sadness that the world is carrying. I'm going to send you a picture this week. It's actually my Easter message of a picture I found on the internet by a group of Sisters of Charity that speak to me so profoundly of Jesus holding all of this for us. And it is in this week that he enters into Jerusalem. And we, here, right now in this time, we are Jerusalem. He knows, and he comes to suffer and lift us from all the turmoil into new life. The earliest translation of the Bible that we have is in Greek. And the Greek word for turmoil means to shake or quake like an earthquake. In the Gospels, that very same word is used to describe Jesus' entry into Jerusalem, into our Jerusalem. And we have the two readings from yesterday. Okay? Both are celebrating Jesus with us. I am getting some messages on the side, so I'd like to say hello to so many of you, particularly Sharon. And so what is it? Is it psalms and cloaks or suffering and death? The answer is yes. This week is both. Every day it is about our tears and about our joy. Every day. Jesus lived in this kind of tension. I think sometimes we get this idea that Jesus lived in this world of a bubble. You know, like I often wonder, how did they eat? Where did they get the money to eat? And where did they get new shoes? They were always walking. These are the things of life, aren't they? You know, was there a shoemaker? I'm going to guess yes. You know, sometimes when we start to think about those things, Jesus seems very human, doesn't he? That's what we want. Because every day of Jesus' life, he lived in this tension, the same tension that you and I live in. And he went about listening to people, healing their pain. The same time he knew they were plotting to kill him. Am I right, Joanne? Plotting to kill him. This went on together. And through it all, he continued to choose life. And I believe he did, I don't just believe it alone, the theologians have joined me, that he did this to show us the way and called us to walk in the same tension. And he says, I got you. You're not alone. Years back in that fun house, as a little girl, I took one step forward at a time. You know what that feels like, don't you, when you're little or when you're big? Okay? Slowly I could see the light, and it grew brighter. And it all came together in a moment of triumph. My dad saying, I got you. And then going back into the place of terror. This time, not quite as terrified. That's what we learn this week, that we are not alone. I was just looking up before I joined you this evening about the word Easter, and what does the word mean? Well, in the religious tradition, it means the Passover, the Pas. But following its etymology, the word means the east, the dawn. And I told you Jesus entered Jerusalem from the east. Jesus was Easter. Jesus is Easter. Because on that third day, he rose and conquered all kinds of death. Not just the death of our physical bodies, but all kinds. And yet, isn't it true that the world, the country, our lives, our families, we still live in so much shadow of darkness? I'll tell you the truth. Many times since that funhouse experience at 5 or 6, I have found myself feeling alone, afraid, lost. When I do, I try to remember, look for the light. You're not alone. Right now, I'm not alone. My dog was just sniffing my shoes, okay? Because life goes on. The truth is, we live in the light of the resurrection. Not just what happens after we die to our bodies. No. What is happening all over, anytime. There is hope, comfort, love. There is resurrection. In both simple and profound ways. The other night I was watching Channel 7 News. I watched Channel 7 News. Okay? And there was a boy on there who was about 15, and it was his birthday. Maybe you saw it. And since he is 6, he has asked for no presents on his birthday. He asked that money be given to help cure cancer because both his nana and his pop died of cancer. He is now 15. That has continued every birthday at his request. And this year, it went on GoFundMe. And for his birthday, his 15th birthday, this boy raised over $20,000. Why? Because people care. Because we hope, we comfort, and we love each other. Seeing a fireman running out of a burning building carrying a small child, resurrection. A neighbor feeding a homeless person living on the corner, resurrection. A soldier outside Kyiv embracing an old woman who, with her elderly neighbor, had just buried her 51-year-old son in her backyard. He was shot in the back by the Russians. Resurrection. Like Jesus, we battle and sometimes suffer lots of darkness. But we know, and can't we see, a spark of light? And that light is Easter. It's the dawn. It's coming from the east. It is the presence of the resurrected one. And this Easter, we're faced with choices. Which procession are we going to join? The one of negativity and power and despair, or the one of peace and light, and help to enlarge that one? I hope that we can make a decision to join Jesus' procession. But remember, you're probably going to have to give up your cloak, what's protecting you. This is our Holy Week, our journey. Jesus asked only one thing of us, the same thing he asked of his disciples. Stay awake, awake to suffering, awake to resurrection, all the ways we are brought back to life. I get this little book, and I always talk about it, Give Us This Day. It's the readings for every day. I highly recommend it, and I'd love to get a little commission from them for it, but I don't think that's going to happen. At the very beginning of this month's, the person who wrote it was talking about being a minister in an outreach. And an old man came in pushing a wheelchair. In the seat of the wheelchair, it said something like something pain clinic, but on the back of the wheelchair, it just said pain. He was almost frozen. You see, it was sub-zero temperature outside. And he came in covered in ice. And when he got in, he just flopped into the wheelchair. His feet were frozen. This man had nothing. He had nothing with him. And as he waited for help to see the social worker and the doctor, a young woman came in. Now, the person who is the minister there, he's trying to go over and find out what people need and give some comfort. And he is, and he talked to the old man, but the old man was just closed in, you know. And as he was doing this, a young woman came in, and he asked her how she was and what she needed. And she said, I've been on the streets, and it's just too cold. Just too cold. So they waited. And as they waited, the young woman started to talk to the elderly man in the wheelchair. And when it came his time to go in, she pushed his wheelchair in, and they stayed there together. And then when they came out, they came out with new shoes and socks and warm clothes, a coat, right? And she helped him. And then she knelt down in front of him and took off his wet, frozen socks. His toes were almost black. One foot he was missing a big toe. He had seen another winter. And gently she picked up his foot and put a dry sock on. The minister was almost brought to tears in that moment. It's just simple acts, aren't they? By people in need. Everybody's in need there. And then together, she pushed his wheelchair as they went out together to go to the church's shelter for the night. Resurrection. Resurrection. These are never far from us. It is the simple kindnesses that change lives and bring to life. There are palms and there are Hosanna, and I love them. I love them. But there's always more. There's always more. Where do we see resurrection today? I'm going to ask you to think about that tomorrow. Where do we see resurrection this day happening? And how can we help bring hope, light, and peace somewhere in our lives, our family, our country, our town, our block, our world? I went to see my doctor a couple of weeks ago, probably close to a month ago, and she told me a story. She was thinking of the people in Ukraine, and she said, I didn't know what to do. So I went on Airbnb, and I booked an Airbnb in Kyiv. And I said, you did? She goes, yep, I booked it for a week. And she said she heard from the woman. And the woman basically said to her, well, I don't suggest you come here. And she said, no, I just wanted to know, would you be getting the money? And the woman said, yes, it's in my account. She said, that's all I wanted. My doctor has 4 little girls under 7. And she thought of the people in the Ukraine. So I took her inspiration and I went on Etsy, the homemade craft center, and I bought a picture painted by a Ukrainian artist of a sunflower. I was going to show it to you, but I left it in the other room. Beautiful. I hope I brought her a little resurrection. She wrote to me. She said, thank you. Thank you. It cost me $8. I don't know what that's going to do for her, but maybe just the thought. What can you do? What can you do? We are changed and brought to life by how we risk bringing life. And that is indeed Easter. So I wish you a beautiful Holy Week. Even if you don't get to the services, go on the computer and look up what the readings are for the day. Because just the readings today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, they're so good. I just couldn't talk about them all. But they're so good in leading up to how Jesus comes into Jerusalem and then begins to walk, and he's walking to his death. But he knows he's not alone. I got you. I think they're the words for this week. I got you. I hope you can hear them somewhere. And have a beautiful Easter. I will be back to you after Easter with some ideas. I am still not ready to do something in person. Probably the porch chats. We'll have a different world and we'll be outside. But until then, I will see you again here on the computer. And I wish you every blessing. Wherever in your life you need to see light and hope and comfort, may you know resurrection. And I send you my love. Happy Easter.